For the first time in centuries, scientists have exposed the original surface of what is traditionally considered the burial site of Jesus Christ.
In October 2016, the tomb said to hold Jesus was pried open for just 60 hours. It is the heart of history's fiercest power struggle, and the work was carried out by scientists and rival priests who rarely agree on anything. Centuries-old marble, rusted girders, and ancient suspicions all stood in the way. What forced enemies to cooperate, and what did the team really find beneath the stone? The answers may upend both faith and science. Inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, nothing moves without a struggle. Every stone and candle belongs to someone, and each inch of floor is fiercely guarded. For over a century and a half, the Church has been governed by a set of rules so rigid that even shifting a ladder can spark an international incident. In 1852, the Ottoman Sultan issued a decree freezing the rights of the three principal communities: Greek Orthodox, Armenian Apostolic, and Roman Catholic Franciscans, locking them into a delicate balance. The status quo means that any repair, however minor, demands unanimous consent. If a single group objects, the work stops. That's why a wooden ladder has sat unmoved on a ledge above the church's entrance since at least the 18th century. No one dares touch it for fear of breaking the fragile peace. The daily reality inside the church is a patchwork of territories and rituals. Monks from rival denominations have brawled over cleaning schedules and processional routes. Police have been called to break up scuffles over who may sweep a stair or light a lamp. Even the roof is divided, with Coptic and Ethiopian monks living in separate disputed quarters, each watching the other for any sign of encroachment. Every act, from dusting a cornice to opening a door, is laden with centuries of suspicion. So when the edicule, the shrine housing the tomb, began to buckle and crack, the threat was not just structural. The real obstacle was human. Engineers warned that collapse was possible, but the three custodial communities had to agree in writing before a single marble slab could be lifted. Decades of inaction had left the shrine held together by rusted iron girders, a cage born not of engineering necessity, but of religious deadlock. Only the looming risk of disaster forced the hands of the patriarchs. In 2016, after months of tense negotiation, the Greek Orthodox, Armenian, and Franciscan leaders signed a rare joint agreement. For the first time in living memory, the guardians of the holiest site in Christendom put aside their rivalries, if only for a few days, so that scientists could step inside and time could, for a moment, move forward. Steel girders crisscrossed the edicule, their surfaces eaten away by decades of rust. The air inside the shrine was heavy with candle smoke and humidity, a slow, corrosive force that had seeped into the very bones of the structure. Beneath the marble and gold, engineers found limestone blocks crumbling at the edges, their mortar soft as chalk. Sensors placed along the walls registered tiny but relentless shifts. Each day, the cracks grew a little wider. Antonia Moropoulou, a materials engineer from the National Technical University of Athens, led the diagnostic team. Her instruments confirmed what the naked eye had long suspected. The edicule was on the verge of structural failure. The iron supports, first installed after the fire of 1808, had become a liability. Salt deposits from centuries of incense and moisture had eaten into the stone, weakening the very foundation of the tomb. The threat was no longer theoretical. If nothing was done, the risk was clear. Collapse would not just destroy a historical monument, it would strike at the heart of Christian tradition. Thousands of pilgrims passed through each week, unaware that the shrine above them was being held together by little more than habit and hope. Moropoulou's findings left no room for delay. The engineering team outlined a plan for urgent intervention. All three custodial communities received the same warning. The structure could not wait for another round of negotiations. The edicule needed to be stabilized, and the only way forward was to open the tomb itself. Time was now the enemy. The custodians agreed to grant the scientists an unprecedented 60-hour window to complete their work. For the first time in centuries, the fate of the tomb rested not on ancient rivalries, but on the precision and speed of modern engineering. The agreement was ironclad. The team would have just 60 hours inside the edicule, and not a minute more. Once the marble was lifted, the clock would start and the tomb would be resealed at the deadline, no exceptions. For Professor Antonia Moropoulou and her colleagues from the National Technical University of Athens, this was a logistical gauntlet. They mapped out a schedule that left no room for error. Engineers, conservators, and archaeologists would rotate in shifts, working day and night. There would be no pause for rest, no buffer for setbacks. Every task, from laser scanning to mortar sampling, had to be choreographed to the minute. Security was tight. Only those whose names were on the official roster could enter the chamber, and clergy from the Greek Orthodox, Armenian, and Franciscan communities were present at all times, overseeing each step. Equipment was checked and double-checked. The marble cladding, untouched for centuries, would be moved under the watchful eyes of both scientists and priests. Each layer removed or sampled had to be meticulously documented before moving to the next. The team knew this was a one-time offer. The custodians made it clear, once the tomb was closed, it would not be opened again in their lifetimes. The pressure was acute, not just to gather as much scientific data as possible, but to do so without damaging a site revered by millions. Every hour brought new decisions, each one weighed against the relentless countdown. The atmosphere inside the church was electric, charged by the knowledge that history, science, and faith were colliding in a race against time. For those 60 hours, the fate of the tomb rested on the discipline and precision of a handful of experts, working in the shadow of centuries. At the heart of the Aedicule, the restoration team faced their first real test. The marble slab covering the burial bed had not been moved in centuries, and every step demanded absolute precision. Technicians in protective gear rigged a series of padded pulleys and lifting frames around the stone, their hands steady but tense. The weight of history pressed down as much as the marble itself. Each cable was checked, each anchor point verified, while church custodians looked on in silence. Slowly, the team began to slide the marble cladding aside. The sound was muted, stone scraping against stone, followed by the hush of expectation. Years of candle wax and incense had sealed the edges, making the first movement the hardest. As the slab shifted, a thick layer of dark fill material came into view. This was not just dust. It was a compacted mix of debris, wax, and fragments from earlier repairs, a record of centuries hidden in plain sight. The composition suggested more than simple neglect. Each layer hinted at past interventions and the constant push to preserve the sacred site against time and human touch. Every handful of debris was collected and logged, the process methodical and unhurried despite the ticking clock. The rigging crew worked in near silence, aware that any misstep could damage the fragile layers beneath. For the first time in generations, the surface beneath the marble was exposed to open air. The team paused, not just to document, but to register the gravity of the moment. The multi-layered story of the tomb was beginning to unfold, one careful motion at a time. Beneath the thick layer of debris, the team's brushes revealed something unexpected, a fractured slab of gray marble hidden from sight for centuries. Its surface bore a simple, incised cross, unadorned, yet unmistakably deliberate. Art historians on the project recognized the form as one common to the Latin West, a style that flourished during the Crusader era. The cross, cut with a steady hand, echoed the marks left by knights and pilgrims across Jerusalem's sacred sites in the 12th century. This was no casual graffito. The slab had been carefully shaped and set as a protective layer, resting directly atop the original burial shelf. The presence of this engraved cross was more than a devotional flourish. It anchored the tomb's history to the Middle Ages, confirming that Crusader builders had direct access to the ancient rock and took pains to safeguard it. The cracked marble, sealed away beneath later cladding, bore silent witness to centuries of faith and conflict, evidence that medieval Christians revered this exact spot as the burial place of Christ. Pilgrim. Accounts from the period describe the tomb as a focus of intense veneration, with protective measures put in place to shield it from damage and theft. Though the precise date of the carving cannot be pinned to a single decade, its style and context leave little doubt. The slab belongs to the era when Crusader rule shaped the city's holy places. The engraved cross, at once stark and profound, stands as a testament to continuity, connecting the living rock below to the hands and hopes of those who came centuries after. At the core of the tomb, the final marble layer was lifted and set aside, revealing the ancient limestone bench that had been hidden for generations. The chamber fell silent. Scientists and clergy, crowded shoulder to shoulder in the cramped space, paused as the meaning of the moment settled in. This was not a reconstruction or a symbolic monument. The surface before them was the original bedrock, carved out nearly 2,000 years ago. Tool marks were still visible in the pale stone, a direct link to the hands that shaped this burial place in the age of the Second Temple. In the hush, engineers prepared their instruments for rapid documentation. High-resolution laser scans swept across the exposed rock, capturing every contour and irregularity. Samples of mortar were carefully collected from the seams between limestone and marble, destined for laboratory analysis. The team worked with measured urgency, aware that the clock was ticking and the opportunity would not come again. To confirm the tomb's true nature, the engineers undertook one last delicate task. With the consent of the custodians, they cut a small rectangular aperture into the north wall of the chamber. Through this hand-sized opening, the rough, untouched limestone of the original burial cave came into view. The marble and masonry that surrounded the tomb were not standalone constructions. They encased the living rock of a real cave, hewn into a hillside centuries before Constantine's builders arrived. For the first time in living memory, the continuity between ancient quarry, Jewish tomb, and Christian shrine was laid bare. In that fleeting window, science and tradition met at the threshold of the living rock. In a laboratory far from the candlelit silence of the Holy Sepulchre, technicians set to work on mortar samples pulled from the tomb. Each fragment of white lime and sand held a secret, the last time its quartz grains had seen sunlight. The team turned to a method known as optically stimulated luminescence, called OSL. Under deep red safety lights, they ground the mortar and isolated grains of quartz, careful to avoid any accidental exposure to light that could reset the ancient clock within the stone. OSL works on a simple but powerful principle. While buried in darkness, quartz grains absorb energy from the surrounding natural radiation. When exposed to a specific wavelength of light in the laboratory, they release that energy as a faint glow. The intensity of that glow reveals how long the grains have been hidden from daylight, effectively dating the moment the mortar set and the tomb was sealed. After days of careful measurement and calibration, the results came in. The oldest mortar, pressed between the limestone burial bed and the first marble covering, dated to approximately 345 AD. This placed the construction squarely in the reign of Emperor Constantine, matching the earliest historical accounts of the church's founding. The data provided the first direct scientific link between the shrine's physical fabric and the dawn of official Christian veneration at the site. For the scientists, it was a rare moment where the language of physics and the timeline of faith converged on a single measurable date. Inside the tomb, the air was dense with centuries of incense and expectation. Technicians checked their equipment, adjusting sensors and recalibrating scanners, every move watched by clergy in silent anticipation. The instruments had performed flawlessly in the rotunda, but now, pressed against the ancient limestone, some devices began to misbehave. Readings flickered, screens reset themselves, and data streams cut out without warning. Engineers swapped batteries and cables, blaming the heavy humidity and the crush of bodies in the cramped chamber. Others wondered if the thick stone, saturated with wax and oil, was interfering with the electronics. No one could say for certain. Among the church custodians, old stories resurfaced. Some whispered of a fragrance, a sweet, elusive scent, rising from the bare rock as the marble was pulled away. For centuries, Orthodox tradition has spoken of such aromas as signs of sanctity, a phenomenon known as the odor of holiness. Scientists on the team offered practical explanations, perhaps incense oils trapped in the stone or ancient air pockets releasing their contents after centuries in darkness. Yet the sense of something unmeasurable lingered in the chamber. The line between what could be documented and what could only be experienced felt especially thin. The data would leave the tomb, bound for laboratories and reports, but for those present, both the glitches and the fragrances, explained or not, became part of the story. and a reminder of a lingering mystery that not everything inside those walls was subject to calculation or control. Once the last measurements were recorded and the limestone bench was covered again, the engineering team turned to the final task, securing the tomb for the centuries ahead. Modern titanium anchors replaced the rusted iron supports, driven deep into the edicule's frame to lock the structure in place. These anchors, chosen for their strength and resistance to corrosion, were set with a precision that left no room for error. Alongside them, a network of sensors was embedded within the marble and masonry. These quiet sentinels now monitor every subtle movement, every shift in humidity or temperature, feeding data to scientists and custodians who remain vigilant for signs of future stress. No relics or human remains were found within the chamber. The burial bed, bare, intact, and silent, was left undisturbed beneath its marble shield. As the last bolts were tightened and the access sealed, clergy from the Greek Orthodox, Armenian, and Franciscan communities gathered for a brief moment of prayer. The team stepped back, their work complete, knowing it would likely be generations before anyone would look upon the exposed rock again. The tomb, now stabilized and under constant watch, stands as both a monument to ancient faith and a testament to modern science's careful hand. Today, the tomb lies sealed beneath layers of marble and faith, but its scientific trace endures. As pilgrimage and skepticism both grow worldwide, the site remains a crossroads where belief meets evidence and centuries-old questions refuse to rest. No test can resolve what millions feel within these walls. In the end, the mystery is part of the monument. What would you ask if the stones could speak?